You know what's the funny thing about it, Juma? Most businesses aren't even positioning themselves. The market is doing the positioning for them. Because positioning, I've realized, is not something that you can leave to chance. You have to be very intentional about it because it relies on a lot of understanding of your business, your market, your buyers within your particular market or region or wherever it is that you're going after, their needs, their challenges, problems, aspirations. There's a lot of intricacies and details and nuances that goes into positioning. So it's not something that just happens on accident.
Teaching you to make useful content so that you can build long-term relationships with the people that matter to your business. Hello and welcome to the Useful Content Podcast. And today we have a returning teacher in our Useful Content classroom, Winston Henderson. What's up, Winston?
Sir Juma, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I have to remember to put my headphones on, but I am doing very, very well. We had a conversation recently, so this is an interesting offshoot from that conversation. So we wanted to record something new, and I see you smiling because you know what we're going you know what we're going to get into today, and I think this is going to be great for the people. But before we reveal the secrets of what we're getting into, could you please tell the people what you do and how you help your clients make useful content?
So I own a content marketing agency. I guess you could put digital marketing there as well, but we mostly focus on content. So in a nutshell, Juma, to make it as simple as possible, we help our clients, which are typically small business owners. Most of them offer some sort of professional service to take their expertise, leverage their expertise with the needs of their target buyers. And we create content by combining both to help them, first of all, build their authority as a trusted go-to expert for whatever it is they offer. And secondly, from that, how they can generate sales opportunities for their business.
Okay, excellent. I know that's what you do. And I've personally experienced some of it. And we're going to get into that today because I think the genesis of this conversation, this ongoing conversation, was a post you put up on LinkedIn. And that post, I can't remember, what was the title of it? What was the title of that post? I can't remember the title of it, but whatever the title was, it was referring to positioning. And I asked a question in the comments. And let me see, I have the question right here. The question I asked was, what's an easy formula? What's an easy formula to know your positioning? When you saw that question in the comments, what is the first thing that ran through your mind?
The first thing that came to my mind was, is there really an easy formula? Because to get to the point that I got to where I'm able to gain clarity on how to position my brand and differentiate it from what others are doing out there, it took me literally 3 years, Juma, to get to that point. So when you asked me the question, I really pondered, could I explain this in a very easy 1, 2, 3 step formula? And the answer to that was no. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could give something that would be a nice soundbite for social media, but it wouldn't really explain the real extensiveness and the detail that goes into positioning, because it's not something you can really do in a 1 hour workshop or exercise. It's literally something that takes weeks to actually perfect and get it right.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think a lot of people, myself included, struggle with positioning. All right, so before we go on, I want you to tell me, what's your definition of positioning?
Positioning for me is, how can we put the brand out there, communicate the value of the brand that helps to differentiate what other people are doing who offers the same or similar service that you do. So for example, you'll have someone out there who is an IT consultant in cybersecurity, but then if you search on LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure you're probably going to find 500,000, if not 1 million other cybersecurity IT consultants out there. So the goal of positioning and what it really is, all right, we offer cybersecurity. How can we place ourselves or put ourselves out there in the market where people see, first of all, the value in what we do, and secondly, differentiates from all the other cybersecurity professionals out there in terms of how we probably approach, how we offer our services.
So you're saying that positioning doesn't only make you stand out; it sets you apart from other people. And
Exactly.
I found that has been a big conversation these days, and one of the big reasons for that conversation becoming more of a frontline conversation is because of how much low lying content there is because of access to tools like AI, that people are not really making an effort to be different. They're trying to take the path of least resistance when it comes to talking about themselves and their services. And so I find that there's a segment of marketing that conversation is bubbling up to the top. Like, okay, well, these people are doing a lot of stuff. How can we stand, not just stand out, but how can we stand apart? Do you think that that's something that's happening?
It's, I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it's a conversation that's happening a lot more than it used to. Definitely a lot more before I started posting around marketing on LinkedIn, probably I would say 4 or 5 years ago. But no, in the sense of there are a lot of people talking about it, but
Yeah.
actually implementing it is a different thing, because people will say, yes, we need to be different. We need to position ourselves as, really stand out from what all of our competitors are doing out there. But then if you go on a lot of these social media channels, you see that there is very little, if any, differentiation between the content that both competitors are really putting out there.
Hmm. Hmm. You know, one of the things that, and I made a post about this, a kind of a rant post about this yesterday, is the proliferation of AI comments, right, on LinkedIn in particular. I don't know about the other platforms. I'm sure it's happening there too. And one of the reasons I don't like it, apart from the fact that it's most times it's obvious that is not a human being doing it as of now, but also the because of the nature of that type of interaction, that type of automation, all of them look the same. It's just like
Yeah.
everything is it just the way people respond, you could predict the way they're going to respond. And I think that is a symptom of a bigger thing that is happening. And I'm happy you kind of pointed out that there are a lot of people talking about it, but not many people doing things about it. And when we spoke in the session, you said you wish you could give it away to everyone. Why do you feel so strongly about businesses having to be positioned?
Because of my own experience with struggling with it. Because, I mean, you and I know that I offer content marketing services, right? And the thing about content marketing is it's such a misunderstood topic. And so there are a lot of business owners who, if you speak to them, they think, oh, content marketing is just we create memes or fun images or videos for social media and we post it there. Or there are some who may think, well, content marketing is doing keyword research. You write a blog post and you rank it for SEO purposes for Google.
Hmm.
But there are so many intricacies of content marketing over the years and how it's evolved that it can no longer be defined by a single tactic or a single channel, right? Because it's really a multi-channel, omni-channel approach to how you do it. So my biggest issue was, well, I started out in 2016 making the decision that I wanted to position myself as an authority in content marketing. Now,
Yeah.
take into consideration, this is someone who already had been doing marketing for 9 years prior, with other companies, for myself, and so on. But in 2016, I said, I really want to zone in. Yes, I can do all these different marketing things, but I really want to zone in and focus on content marketing. So I went and I started consuming content from people like Neil Patel, Content Marketing Institute in those earlier days with Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose. And they really formed the foundation of me putting the content out there, really positioning myself as such. In 2020, because I was freelancing between 2018 2020, 2020 is when I decided to officially register my business, give it the name ICAD Marketing and so on, and all the formalities that come with it. So starting out, I just position myself the same how I've been for the past 4 years prior, which is, offering content marketing services. But then the problem became that there were so many people who were saying they were content marketing experts or they offer content marketing services. When you really pull back the layers, all they're really doing is just offering social media management services, which,
Right.
yes, is a part of content marketing, but it's not really the holistic view of content marketing. And to make things worse, as I mentioned before, it was misunderstood. There were certain misconceptions about what content marketing really was. So when I was speaking with clients, they assumed, well, or should I say, they pretty much found it hard to really differentiate me between what everyone else was saying in terms of content marketing services. So I struggled for a long time because I knew I wanted to offer content marketing services. I would say the top three biggest challenges I had was, one, would be my ideal client or my best fit buyer, as I call them, right? Because there are so many use cases that could apply to so many different industries, so many different segments, so many different personas. But I really wanted to zone in on just like one specific segment or industry. I
Mhm.
struggled with that because I was constantly changing. The second thing was, uh, what specific service or how would that service look like, right? So it's content marketing, but how would I package it in a way where they could see the value I could deliver outside of someone who is just posting on social media? And then the third challenge for me was, all right, so I know I'm trying to figure out who my ideal clients are. I'm trying to figure out what the offer is based on what their pain points and challenges are. But how do I now communicate that to the market to really position myself as someone that's differentiated from everything else that's out there?
Mm.
And so I spent 3 years. It literally feels like yesterday, but I spent 3 years agonizing over this thing. I mean, like literal sleepless nights, just like writing down, racking my brain. How can I really do this thing differently? How can I really make this thing work? So I came across April Dunfer's book, which I think was the first official introduction to positioning, right? She has a book called Obviously Awesome, which speaks specifically about positioning. So I read that book, a lot of great information in there. April is wonderful. But one of the things I found about the book is that I understood it in theory, but in terms of applying it was a bit of a challenge for me. Because her book, I believe, is more for people at the intermediary level to advanced level. And I'm someone who is basically a beginner. So I think it's more towards marketers who are product marketers who already have some basic understanding of positioning.
Right.
So struggle with it again for a few months after reading April's book. And then I came across the guys over there at Fletch PMM, which would be
Right.
Anthony and Robert, which kind of reintroduced the whole idea of positioning for me. But they did it in a way where I'm kind of like a baby learning to walk for the first time, and they held my hand and said, "All right, step one, do this. Step two." So it gave me a really step by step detailed approach of how to approach it, which is really how my brain works and how my brain learns.
Yeah.
And so the challenge that I had though with their approach is that their focus is mostly startup businesses in the B2B SaaS space, right? Which is a product focused. My business is a service based business. So I literally had to spend weeks consuming, I probably consume at least, I would say, 50 to 60 pieces of content that they have, both from their social media, their LinkedIn posts, as well as they have a Notion deck that I actually paid for a yearly subscription. And I literally just comb through everything that they did. And really, once I understood it enough, then I said, all right, how can I take what I learned from them and now apply it to my business?
Mm.
And so I tested that for a few months, for a few weeks, deciding on a new specific ideal client that I wanted to go after, which is small businesses. Now decided to deprioritize marketing leaders. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not selling to marketing leaders again within organizations. It just means that for a specific period to build that authority, to build that positioning, I really want to focus on small business owners because they're the ones who probably need it the most.
Right.
So, a very long winded answer to your question. Why I said that I'd probably give this away for free because I understand what I went through those years of agonizing of how to differentiate myself, how to differentiate my brand. I know it's a problem that a lot of startups and small businesses have as well. So, if I could really just teach them how to do this on their own, then I would be much happier for it because I knew the struggle that I went through.
Right. Well, I guess now there's only one question. And that question is, well, what is your positioning statement?
For my specific position statement or how to actually build it.
Well, we're going to get into building it, but if you struggle so long with it, I would love to know, after all that struggle, what did you come up with? What did you come up with?
And I'm going to I've slightly tweaked it recently because I realize it's funny because it's something else. Let me tell you what it was before and let me tell you the slight tweak that I made. So before it was building your authority or helping small business owners build their authority to generate more sales opportunities using content. So that's what it was before.
Right, yes.
No, I've slightly tweaked it based on someone who connected with me recently, and I asked them, well, what brought them to my profile? And they said, oh, the part about you talking about leveraging expertise, that's what really caught my eye. So now
Mm,
it's more along the lines of helping small business owners leverage their expertise to build their authority to generate more sales opportunities using content. So
okay.
it goes back to that first introduction where you asked me, what it is that we do. It's simple. Your expertise, your buyer's needs will combine it content to build your authority, which generates sales opportunities.
Right. Okay, good. I know we're supposed to get into the actual system, but I have a few more questions before we do. I don't know if I've slightly lied when we were in the green room and said I didn't prepare for this, but maybe I did more than I thought. Okay, so that's great. So that's and of course it's okay to tweak your positioning over time.
You'd have to,
You'd have to. Why would you have to? Why would you say that?
because buyers' behaviors change, how they buy change, the market needs change. What's a problem for them today won't be a problem for them tomorrow. As a matter of fact, there is a particular head of marketing that I've been in dialogue with for probably the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time I have a conversation with that person, they're talking to me about a new problem that they're struggling with within the organization and how content marketing can help them fix it. So that's one of the reasons also why it's so important to just focus on one specific segment or one specific industry at a time, because if you have more than one positioning, it's going to be, first of all, it's going to be very hard for you to build authority to that one person or to multiple people or multiple
Yeah.
personas at the same time. And at the same time, they won't trust you as the expert for what it is that you really offer and how you can help them. And if you doubt this, think about it. If you think about who is the greatest that you believe at their craft, whether it's a Michael Jordan from me at basketball, or whether you think Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos is, great at their being entrepreneurship or whatever it may be, or Isaac Newton or whatever the case may be, or Serena Williams at tennis, all of them have one thing in common. They're known as the greatest for one thing
Yeah. Yeah.
and one thing only. I mean, even when Michael Jordan tried to leave basketball and go and play baseball, he was horrible at it. And no one, even though he was great at basketball, it was still hard to convince people that he was great at baseball as well. Same thing if you want to bring it here locally to the Caribbean, same thing with Usain Bolt, right? Considered to be the fastest man that has ever lived. Made a great career for himself in the sprinting world. Left and decided to try his hands at football. Americans they call it soccer. And though he did okay there, there's no one who refers to Usain Bolt as the greatest or one of the greatest footballers of all time. They refer to him as the greatest sprinter of all time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same concept that when you're building your position, when you're building your authority, you want to be known to one segment for one specific thing.
Mm, mm. So are you saying that many businesses are just positioning themselves too broadly?
You know what's the funny thing about it, Juma? Most businesses aren't even positioning themselves. The market is doing the positioning for them.
Right. Right.
Because positioning, I've realized, is not something that you can leave to chance. You have to be very intentional about it because it relies on a lot of understanding of your business, your market, your buyers within your particular market or region or whoever it is that you're going after, their needs, their challenges, problems, aspirations. There's a lot of intricacies and details and nuances that goes into positioning. So it's not something that just happens on accident.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. All right. So this is the last question I'm going to ask you before we get into the how to do it. So there's a whole thought on uh, how internal people perceive this positioning versus external people perceiving a positioning. And are there parts of your positioning that deliberately stay hidden? Or a better question might be, do you have to do something different internally than you have to do externally? Or is it generally the same thing that you're known by externally and internally in your business?
I'm going to say something that many of your other podcasting guests have said. That's a really great question. That's a really give me a second. Let me think about that question. I think it has to be the same, and here's the reason why I believe that. If we're talking about the buyer's journey, the customer journey, the buyer experience, the customer experience, it has to be the same throughout.
Yeah.
So it can be a case where externally through your marketing communications, whether that's social media, email, wherever it is that you do marketing, you're saying one thing and you're positioning yourself one way. But then when they interact with a salesperson, for example, it's a different way that you're communicating and positioning the company. And then, if you decide to become a client or a customer, then whether that's client support, customer service, they're saying something differently. So that's the reason why I said that it's not something that you can really do in a 1 hour workshop, because it involves the entire organization as a whole coming together and saying, this is how we're going to position the brand. This is how we're going to be known in the market. And every single person has a role to play at different touch points through that customer journey to ensure that we're staying on brand. Because whatever your positioning decides, or whatever you decide your positioning needs to be, you need to stay on brand on that. But as you rightly said, positioning can change, right? So typically, I tell people, listen, give it at least 6 months, at most 12 months. And then if you realize that how you're trying to position really isn't working out, then you can always change it, because positioning happens at 2 levels, or you could probably even say 3 levels. To further answer your question, there's positioning at the company or the brand level.
Mm-hmm.
So holistically, in terms of the company, the brand, this is how we want to be positioned. This is how we want to be known at the in the market. There's positioning at the departmental level where, all right, this is how marketing supports the positioning. This is how sales, this is how customer support supports the positioning. And then there's positioning at the product or the service level, where you might say, well, we have product A for this specific segment. This is how we're going to position product A for this specific segment. Product B for this specific segment. This is how we're going to position it. But the key thing is that everything needs to flow back up to the overarching positioning at the brand or company level.
Yeah. Yeah. So it all has to be connected, regardless of what you come up with for the product. For the what's the second one? The second one is the
The departmental level.
departmental. It all has to flow back into what the brand is. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. All right, good. So now that we've gotten all that going and we've cleared up all of those things that needed to be cleared up, let's now get into the actual exercise of this formula that I have experienced of how you position. Do you want me to teach it, or are you okay with teaching it?
You know what I'd love to do? I'd love for you to share your experience. That's what I would love, because it's one thing coming from me, but for someone else who's actually experienced it recently, I think the audience would appreciate that.
All right, so here's the deal. I took that. You sent me the chart because there's a kind of a flow chart that you use in order to determine the positioning. Now, in order for this to work, the person who you're talking with, in that case, it was me. I had to have some knowledge of my ICP, my ideal client profile. I had to have some knowledge of their problems. I had to have some knowledge of what the things that they were struggling with and how we could help. And one of the eye-opening things is that you defined, which I knew, but somehow it popped, it became clear. The system that we have that is helping them, we have to know what that is clearly, and we have to define that. And it's nice to give it a name, something that is good, is something that's catchy that we could talk about. That system that we have. So what happened is I took that flow chart that you gave me, and my business partner and I sat down with that on Monday going here. And I told him, listen, I did this exercise with Winston, with ICAD, and it was an excellent exercise, right? I think I've figured this thing out. I think we figured this thing out. But I told him, since you weren't there, and obviously we're business partners, let's go through it again, and let's look and see if what I said made sense, and what Winston did with me, if that made sense. And we went back through and we tweaked some of the things, and through that follow-up process, I now think that our positioning statement is not complete yet, because we still have to go in and we still have to do the end part, which is our better way, right? So it goes
Right.
the use cases, the current way that's not working, the problems with the current way, our better way, and the benefits of our way. And so the part that I think was really, really important that we need to now go and define and make into step by step is what exactly is our better way. Even though we've been doing it and we kind of know it, but I think that is so critical because we understand the problems of our clients because we've been talking with them. We understand what their struggles are, what's not working for them, and the problems with those things. But I think in order for us to position ourselves properly and to serve them properly, we need to go back and really define our way and structure that out. And of course, there are benefits on the end of that. So that's just a kind of summary of my process and the ongoing thing that's happening. Now I'll hand it back over to you, the professional, so you can explain the details of how those things work.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned your way of doing it, because the way of how we approach it at ICAD Marketing, we have named and claimed and framed our name, called the Authority Branding System. That's what we call it, which is an 11-step process of that positioning statement that I just mentioned: how to leverage your expertise, build the authority, generate sales opportunities, so on, using content. But we go through that 11-step process because we find that positioning is not just deciding, hey, this is how we want to position. Let's create our entire marketing communication, whether that's content, whether that's press releases around this, right? You have to really get deep and dive deep. So the aspect of that you mentioned that we went through, sorry, is the value proposition canvas, which is the fourth step in the 11-step process. But there are actually 3 steps before that which are very important. And that first step is that you have to do a business assessment. And that business assessment is understanding, and this is how we are going to actually decide which segment to really go after. So you look at all the past clients that you have, past customers, and you say to yourself, well, what are the commonalities between the ones that we really want to go after? Whether that's the criteria is we are looking at which deals are the most profitable for us, which deals have the longest lifetime customer value for us, which deals are the easiest to close. So whichever criteria that you decide that is the basis for your ideal client profile, then you focus on that. Then once you do that, you also want to do a SWOT analysis. And well, for those who, let me not assume everyone knows what a SWOT analysis is. So that means you're looking at, SWOT is actually an acronym meaning strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And you want to go through that, but the one you really want to pay attention to are the first two, which are your strengths and your weaknesses. So you want to look on, well, what are the strengths that we have internally, culturally, technically, whichever way you want to look at it, that can help us to differentiate and really helps us deliver in a way that no one else can. And then you also want to look at what your weaknesses are. You want to stay away from your weaknesses because it makes no sense trying to position your company around what you're weak at, right? The other aspect of that, we're still at step one, by the way. The other aspect of that is that competitive analysis. So you want to also look at your competitors to see, well, where are their strengths? So you want to do the same thing as well. Where are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? And you want to stay away from trying to position yourself against their strengths, and you really want to focus on position yourself against their weaknesses. So let me give an example of this. So for the people listening. So for example, one of the strengths that I have and I've developed culturally in ICAD marketing is that we're very detailed and meticulous in how we approach working with clients. Hence why we have an 11-step process, and it's not just, hey, just start creating content, right? Because there are a lot of steps that go into this. So that's our strength. One of the weaknesses that we've identified with our competitors that clients have shared with us is that a lot of competitors or a lot of other agencies don't take the time to understand their clients' business. They don't take the time to really understand their clients' customers. A lot of them are really using a cookie cutter template with all their clients. So there's no sort of customization based on what the client's goals are. So we've taken that, and by the way, it's not just something that we recognize in terms of our strength, but even clients have said to us specifically, more than one clients, that the reason why they love working with us because we're so detailed in how we approach doing things. So that's step one, doing that business assessment. Step two now is based on your criteria of which particular segment you want to focus on, then you use that to do client research, which is really client interviews. So you want to speak to, I would say, at least 7 to 10, because once you get over 10, then the responses start to repeat. So you're questioning them, and you're asking them, you're interviewing them, and what you want to identify are 5 things or 3 things at least. One, before they actually started working with you or before they came to you, well, let me backtrack. There's actually a step before that. The first step is understanding what it is that they're trying to achieve, what it is that they're trying to get done. Some people call it use cases, some people call it jobs to be done. That's the first step. The second step is to understand through those interviews, well, how were they trying to execute this particular use case or this particular activity before coming to you? The third thing is what specific problems did they experience before actually coming to you? So that would be their current way of how they were doing things before, and the problems associated with that current way that weren't allowing them to achieve the particular outcomes that they were after. And now, once you have all that information, then that's when, well, let me also include this because it would be important. Where that fourth question is, well, what value or what benefit did you get as a result of working with us, right? Because that's going to help you to build your value proposition canvas. So that's step 3, which will be that client research. Step 4 now, Juma, which is what you just mentioned, is where we take all that information and we create a flow chart. So the first step of that is, well, what are the top 3 use cases? Based on the 10 clients that we interviewed, we pick the top 3 use cases. Then we look on, well, what were the current ways that they were doing these top 3 use cases before? What were the top 3 problems associated with those particular use cases or their current way of doing things? And now the other step would be that, your specific system or way of approaching it, that's the better way than how they were doing it before. And now the final step of that flow chart would be the benefits of actually doing it your way. So how you actually position yourself now as the authority to differentiate your brand, to differentiate than what all the other competitors are doing, is to say, hey, this is what you're trying to achieve. These 3 activities or these 3 outcomes is what you're trying to achieve. The problem is that you're doing it this way before. And because you were trying to do it this way, these are the problems that you had associated with this current way that you were doing it before. With our approach, this is a better way of doing it that leads to these specific outcomes. So let me be very specific so people can actually get an actual idea of how this works. So let's take ICAD marketing, right? The top use cases that we found is that people are trying to find new ways to get clients. They're trying to find new ways of how to get those clients outside of their network, to grow their business outside of their network, and they're trying to generate qualified leads who have a genuine interest in what they have to offer. So that would be the use cases or the outcomes that they're trying to do. Currently, how they were doing it before is that they were relying on their network, they were relying on their referrals to actually get businesses. Some of them ran like cold ads, whether over LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, to actually generate leads, but it wasn't really working out because a lot of how they approach it was very broad, it wasn't targeted, it wasn't segmented. So and that would be one of the problems. So the problems associated with that would be, well, once they actually depleted their network, then it will be difficult for them to find new clients and get new business. They found that a lot of the people generated or a lot of the referrals from their network were unqualified leads. And they found that it was harder to close those particular leads because people didn't necessarily see the value in what they had to offer, because this is someone who is basically an introduction to someone else, right? So it's hard for them to really see the value in what you have to offer if it is that they don't even really understand what you offer in the first place. So what we had to do was to say, all right, this is how you were doing it before. This is the problems associated with it. Our authority branding system can help you where we can show you how to generate more qualified leads and sales opportunities without having to rely on your network, without having to rely on referrals. So now we're talking about how can you tap into the cold market, how can you tap into the mainstream market to present your solution in a way where people who don't even know you can understand the value that you deliver, can understand that why you're the go-to expert for your particular thing. And that's the benefits where you tap into more sales opportunities outside of your network. You generate and attract best fit clients who actually see the value in what you have to offer. So that's pretty much the step-by-step flow chart that I just went through.
I realize that this flowchart is like a gateway drug, right? You essentially, I mean, and I understand that you give away the information, you do the implementation, right? But it is like a gateway drug, because when you go through this and you realize how much clarity you get from just this simple chart, you say like, okay, well, there's more. How do we actually, what's before and what's after? And talking with you now, and this is something that came up in the discussion that we had on Monday. We realized that, oh, some things are missing from this. There are gaps, right? Because even though business owners know intuitively some of these things, to order them, to put them in a system and to say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's a hard thing. And I think for us, for business partners, it might be even worse, because my perception in the market, because of where I'm positioned, might be different to my business partner's perception in the market. And I think what one of the challenges we were facing when we got together is that, and that's why I'm saying we need to do our better way now, because I have a ton of things that I know have experience and I've done, and he has a ton of things. We have to come and bring the system together and align the system now so that we know exactly these components will work. So my big question is that when people position themselves, right, does it often lead to major changes across the entire business?
I would, well, my immediate answer to that would be yes. And let me elaborate. Yes, the difficulty in actually changing things across the entire organization would depend, one, first of all, how big your company is, how many moving parts it has, right? Because if it's just you and your business owner, for example, then it's just the two of you. So it's easy for you to work through those things. But let's say you have a business where you have a staff of 5, 10, 20 people that you've been operating for the past 5 years, and you're used to doing things a particular way. On some level, repositioning or changing a position or developing a new positioning will have to influence or affect how you do business. Because it's the same thing with me, for example, where I had to now change, as a matter of fact, I had to change my LinkedIn profile. I had to change the LinkedIn profile for the company page. I'm now in the process of revamping our entire website to speak to this new positioning. So
Yeah.
it does kind of shake things up a bit. But I think the most important thing is, and you said it, the main thing here is clarity,
Mm,
right? Because I promise you, I've had enough of these conversations to know there are a lot of business owners who don't have clarity on how they're positioned, why they're different, who their ICP is. There are a lot.
mm,
And we often think we know, but just like you, this exercise gave me clarity to help me to realize that I really don't have a handle on this as I thought I did.
mm,
And so if you're a business owner, then you have to ensure that how you're positioned, and this is how, if there's some sort of internal conflict as to the direction you should really take your position in. That's why I started with the business assessment first. That helps you to define which specific segment that you're going after to develop your ICP. Because your positioning shouldn't be based primarily on, not saying that you shouldn't have some input, but it shouldn't be based primarily on what my perspective is as the founder or CEO of the company, what you and your partner's perspectives are based on how you see the market. Yes, that will play a role, but ultimately, you should allow the market to determine that and allow the insights and the feedback that you get from those client research to determine that, because they're the ones that you're going to be selling to,
yeah.
right? You're not selling to your business partner. I'm not selling to my marketing peers on LinkedIn if I'm targeting business owners, that is. It's the business owners. So one of the ways to really test this to see, well, there's a particular metric, it's a qualitative metric that I use in those earlier days to really test to see if your positioning is really hitting the market. Something I call problem resonance. Problem resonance means that if we define a particular problem statement to our ICP or best fit buyers that we're trying to target, is the problem relevant to them and does it resonate with them? Right. So if I put it out there, do they say, you know what, this sounds like something I'm struggling with, or this sounds like something that I have struggled with, or man, I'm so grateful that you've actually put into words what I've been thinking all along. Like those are the type of sentiments and statements that you want to get back from the market. And you can do this through ways in terms of testing this. You can do this through putting out content out there, which is a longer way, a longer path to go. But the other quicker way is that you can just try to pitch your services using a new problem statement. So randomly just picking up the phone call and say, "Hey, I'm Juma from so and so. We offer these services. One of the things we realize is that our clients typically struggle with this problem. Is this something that is the same for you?" Because that's what I did. Which is one of the reasons why I started offering the free consultation, because it was mutually beneficial to the people who took on the consultation, because it helps them to gain clarity that they can now take for themselves and use it within their business, even without having to take up our services whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, hey, if you want to take this information and use it for yourself without paying us a single dollar, then fine. But at the same time, what I was getting back from it is when I spoke to these business owners, it helps me to identify, well, these are the specific problems that they have, and then I'll pick the one that's the most common, and then I'll do another set of consultation to really push it to them to say, hey, this is the problem that you're experiencing. This is how we solve it. Is that something that sounds interesting to you? And they'll say yes. And I'll also use LinkedIn cold DMs for the very same thing, where I'll message people, I'll add people first of all who fit within that ICP. I'll message them to start a conversation, and at some point in time, I'll bring up the conversation around, hey, are you having problem getting clients? Do you mostly get clients through your network and referrals?
Mm,
Has that been a problem for you? And I would say 7, 8 out of 10 of the times, people will say yes, it resonates. And they're willing to have a sales conversation about it, because it's not just enough for them to say, yes, we have this problem, but are they willing to pay to have it solved?
right. Right.
So just going through all that, you realize how your content, your website, your sales pitches, your sales deck, how you approach selling, everything in terms of how you communicate that that positioning and that problem statement could literally change up how you currently do everything.
Mm. Yeah. So hearing you say this, like from if I was to be very objective, I would say that this is a fantastic thing because it would lead to more business and it would lead to better outcomes for everyone. But have you had a case or have you seen where people resist this new positioning or people are saying, well, we don't need this. But when you hear them talk about it, you can tell it's a wide swath of people that they're going after. They're not very targeted at all, but they resist having to be targeted for some reason or the other. Have you seen that happen?
You're asking some really good questions. I can tell you that. Uh, I would say yes, but the pushback isn't necessarily them saying, "Hey, we're okay, we're fine, we don't have a problem with this." And I wouldn't even necessarily call it a pushback. Really, I would more see it as they whether they're incapable or they don't want to. The behavioral change isn't there. So they'll agree with me 100%. Yes, we know we have, and they may not even recognize it as a positioning problem. They may come to me and they may say, "Hey, we're trying to get clients, but or we're trying to generate qualified leads, but the people who we talk to, they're not interested in what we have to offer." Or they'll say something like, "Well, we're trying to put ourselves out there to get new business, but every time we do, they're either choose to doing whatever it is in-house or they go with bigger name brands or more recognizable brands to do this particular thing." So they recognize a problem is there, but to actually get them to make that shift to say, "Well, yes, we have this problem, let's work on solving it," I find that's the biggest hurdle. And as a business owner myself, as a marketer myself, because I have spoken to marketers who have the same problem as well, I understand completely and I empathize with them, because even though I'm the one here teaching this and telling people to do this, it literally took me, I would say, probably 2 3 months. So I was already struggling with this thing for 3 years. I found a solution that worked for me. It took about 4 months to really understand the inner workings of how it really works. And even though I understood how it worked, for me to decide to deprioritize one segment and focus on just another segment and say, "All right, this segment, which are business owners, is the only segment I'm going to go after, and I'm not going to push communication so much to that second segment that I deprioritize." Even for me, it took me at least 2 months and several conversations to act well with myself, and even conversation in the comment section with Anthony from Fletch, to really make that final decision that, all right, you know what? There's this fear of missing out, but
Yeah.
what's the worst that could happen, right? I mean, it's not like I'm an Apple or a Microsoft or a Google where I have this established brand. Everybody knows me for one thing. Like, it's not going to hurt the brand very little, if any at all, if I decide to just do this one thing. And Juma, man, I can tell you, when I made that decision to just focus on one segment, it was like the same experience you had in that session
Yeah.
was the same experience I had, where it just everything became so clear. Everything, what I wanted to talk about, how I wanted to talk about it, how I initiated sales conversations, the value I knew I could deliver versus what other competitors who offer content marketing services can offer. Like, everything became so clear. The offer in terms of the authority branding system and being able to break down that 11-step process and what each step entails became so clear because of that one decision to just focus on one segment. So To answer your question, I give very long-winded answers as you can see. But to answer your question, yes, but it's not so much the pushback; it's more getting them to make that mental decision to change what they're doing to a better way, and which is why a lot of my content centers around trying to get them to understand why their current way of doing things isn't working for them, even though they may or may not be aware that it is. And even if they are aware, it's that because you've been doing it for so long, it's hard to really break that habit to do something that may be in your better interest than what you're currently doing.
So, Winston, I think that is an amazing uh, look at what positioning is and some of the challenges business owners may have when they're thinking about positioning. Before we go, is there any last piece of advice that you'll give someone who is thinking about this? They're on the fence, they're wondering if they should do it, they have challenges, but they don't know if it'll be worth going through this positioning process, even though they've heard me vouch for it and they've heard you talk about what it's done for your business and they've heard the examples. Could you, if somebody's on the fence about it, what would you say to them?
If you've been struggling for the longest while, how to stand out, how to differentiate yourself, that's more than enough reason to do positioning. And if it is a case where you're still on the fence, trust and believe that as time progresses and as the barrier to entry becomes lower and lower for people entering your space, it's going to become even harder than it is right now for you to generate new business and get clients or customers for your business. Because I can tell you, the internet, especially AI, has pretty much removed that barrier to entry. Where even for someone like me who has absolutely no skill in coding, could find some AI tool right now, tell it, hey, this is an app or a platform that I want to build, write the code for me, and it will literally do that for me. And I could just simply go on Fiverr and probably outsource to some programmer or software developer to say, hey, clean up this code for me based on what I want to do, and then go on outsource again to a UX designer to say, all right, I want to build out this front end. So in terms of the services and resources that are out there and how everything right now is so saturated, the one thing that's really going to save your business and help you to really attract the type of clients that you want to attract and grow your business is your positioning. And let me leave with this final story. I have a friend of mine who offers professional services. Right, this is someone that talk about work-life balance. She has two clients that are paying that's paying her exceptionally well. I think it's three. Paying her exceptionally well. She works remotely. She travels all over the world doing work, right? How she got those two or three businesses was through her network and through referrals. Who most of us as small business, that's how we start out.
Hmm.
One of the clients decided that, hey, we no longer require your services because we're going to bring your services in house. That one client that she got or that she had suddenly cut her income and revenue in half as a result of losing that client. And because she didn't necessarily position herself to attract more clients into her pipeline, now she's at a place where business is struggling. She's thinking about going out and getting a job just to make ends meet. All because she, like most of us, right? So this is a her thing, like, because it happened to me. It's happened to me at least two times. So I've had to rebuild ICAD marketing three times over the space of 4 years, simply because I position myself as someone offering content marketing services. But as I said, the barrier to entry is so low that there's so many other choices out there, and I had to learn the hard lesson twice to really figure out how to position myself to the point now where I believe, right? I believe that there's a clear distinction between the services I offer versus everyone else. And as a result of that, for the first time this year, within the last 3 months, we've generated close to $400,000 US in qualified pipeline. Qualified pipeline meaning these are people who are actually interested and we're having conversation with actually, procuring our services. Whereas before, if I could get close to 400,000 in a year, I would be thrilled. And simply because of that simple shift that we made 3 months ago, we've generated more pipeline than we've ever been in the last 4 years. So if that isn't enough reason to switch the positioning, then I don't know what is. I gave you the cons of it, of that story that I told of my friend, and also that happened to me as well, relying on my network and referrals. And I just told you an example of how that site switch really has propelled the business. So I'm very excited to see what next year this time is going to look like for us.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Winston, for sharing those insights and those stories and so many things that really would encourage people to put themselves in a position to make more money and more revenue. If people want to find you online to find out more about their services, where can they look?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Winston A in my initials, which is Anthony A. Henderson. It's really LinkedIn because, as I mentioned before, our website is down right now because we're revamping it with a new positioning. Because we tested it, so we found that it works. So we want to do that revamp. But you can reach me directly on LinkedIn. You can also reach me at email winston@icadmarketing.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So thank you so much, Winston, for joining us today on the Useful Content Podcast and for all your expertise and insight. Thank you, students, for joining us as well. Useful Content Podcast. No, that's wrong. Useful Content Classroom. Dismissed. And we're clear. I never got that wrong before. All right, let me close off because I know we're running on this very near time here. The Useful Content Podcast is brought to you and produced by Relate Studios. You can see the work we do at our website, relatestudios.com. If you like what you've heard on the podcast today, please follow, leave a rating, and come back next week for another great episode. And if you want to get more useful content in between that, you can follow me, Juma Bannister, on LinkedIn. See you soon in the Useful Content Classroom. But until then, don't forget to make useful content.